The Grand Colosseum of Ithra Prime had a rule carved above its gate in 7 languages, the oldest and most absolute law of the arena. No combatant has ever survived past round 1. It wasn't hyperbole. It was engineering. The pit reconfigured itself between rounds, gravity wells, atmosphere composition, terrain, even light spectrum, cycling through hazards drawn from 100 conquered worlds' worst environments. Round 1 alone had killed more challengers than every war the Ythraxi Empire had fought in the last 3 centuries combined, because Round 1 was designed to be survivable in theory and lethal in practice. A shifting crystal maze under triple gravity, laced with vents that periodically flash-froze the air. Arena Master Vosk Thane had presided over 412 of these openings. He had never once had to activate Round 2. Human-female, he announced to the packed stands, voice booming through the amplification crystals. You have been offered as this cycle's challenger by your species' diplomatic envoy, under provision that survival earns your world's trade concessions. I extend to you the traditional courtesy. He gestured toward the sealed gate at the pit's edge, beyond which the crystal maze already churned under its brutal false gravity. Yield now, and die with dignity outside the pit, rather than within it. Vera rolled her shoulders, testing the give of her boots against the platform. I'll pass, she said, but thanks for the offer. Somewhere in the observation gallery above, Ronan allowed himself a small, private smile. He'd flown in from the embassy ship an hour before the opening ceremony specifically to watch this, and he had exactly zero intention of explaining to anyone in that gallery why he wasn't worried. The gate opened. Vera walked in like she was late for a meeting. Round 1's crystal maze was raided by Ythraxi combat engineers to disorient and eventually crush any biped within 11 minutes through a combination of triple gravity fatigue and thermal shock. Vera cleared it in 4, using the flash freeze vents as handholds. The sudden traction of frost-slick crystal turned out to be perfect for climbing. If you'd grown up on a world where your own atmosphere occasionally tried to kill you, and you'd learned to read hazards as tools instead of threats. The crowd's roar, which had started as bloodthirsty anticipation, curdled by rounds, ended into something more like confusion. Round 2 was a swarm of Ythraxi combat drones, programmed with lethal force authorization and a directive to overwhelm through numbers. Vera put her back against the one wall in the arena that didn't have a blind angle and calmly disassembled them one at a time as they funneled toward her, using a snapped-off drone limb as an improvised bludgeon after her own weapon jammed on Drone 11. By round 5, the arena had gone very quiet. By round 9, a live predator from the Ythraxi homeworld's deepest trench, a thing with 6 rows of teeth and no concept of surrender. The crowd had stopped cheering entirely and started simply watching, the way you watch something you don't have a framework for yet. Vosk Thane stood at his podium, staring down at the readouts, and for the first time in 412 openings, felt something cold settle behind his sternum. Activate round 10, he said, and his voice, for the first time in decades, was not entirely steady. He's rattled, Ronan murmured, watching the arena master's hands hover over the control crystals a half-second too long before committing. Beside him, an Ythraxi noble in ceremonial plating, Consul Draith, one of the Empire's ranking trade officials, and the reason this whole spectacle existed in the first place, hadn't spoken in 3 rounds. His mandible plates were locked rigid. This is not possible, Draith finally said. The pit was calibrated against your species' physiological data. Your government provided it. We did, Ronan agreed. Then this should have killed her by round 3. It should have, Ronan said, if the data we gave you was the complete data. Draith turned, slowly, faceted eyes narrowing. Explain. Ronan gestured down at the pit, where Vera was currently walking, not running, walking, through round 11's superheated magma glass floor panels, timing her steps between the panels' cooling cycles with the bored precision of someone crossing a familiar street. Every hazard in your arena is calibrated around the idea of a threshold, Ronan said. A gravity level a body can't survive past. A temperature it can't endure. A distance it can't outrun. Your data was accurate. Humans really do have those thresholds. He nodded toward Vera. What we didn't send you was the part of the file that explains how much training it takes to get a human all the way up to that threshold and hold her there, comfortably, for an hour. Because 200,000 years of a hostile home planet built us to treat nearly lethal as a Tuesday. Drath said nothing. Below, Round 12's toxic atmosphere hazard hissed to life around Vera, and she simply held her breath, checked a chronometer on her wrist, and kept moving. By round 16, half the stadium had left. Not out of boredom. Nobody in 4 centuries had ever left an Athraxi arena bored, but because the mood in the crowd had curdled into something closer to religious dread. They had come to watch an execution dressed up as sport. What they were witnessing instead was a demonstration, patient and unhurried, of exactly how much margin a Deathworld species kept in reserve even while operating at what their own government had assured the Empire was the edge of human survival limits. Round 17 was a full gravity collapse, the pit's artificial gravity spiking to 6 times standard, an environment no biological combatant had ever remained conscious in longer than 90 seconds. Vera sat down, cross-legged, and waited it out. By round 18, the arena master's hands were visibly shaking over the controls. The pit had cycled through every hazard in its 4th-century catalog. There was nothing left in the system that hadn't already failed to so much as slow her down. Vera, standing in the wreckage of round 18's collapsed structural maze, checked the position of Ithra Prime's sun through the shattered dome above and, very audibly, through the arena's own amplification crystals, yawned. It was not a performance. Ronan, watching from above, knew that for a fact. He'd seen Vera do exactly the same unguarded, bored little yawn during a 4-hour Senate budget hearing back on Earth. This was not a woman putting on a show of contempt for the crowd. This was a woman who was, genuinely, a little tired of waiting for something interesting to happen. That, more than anything, was what finally broke the room. Vosk Thane's hand came off the controls entirely. He stood at his podium for a long moment, staring down at a challenger who had just survived 18 consecutive rounds. No combatant in the arena's 400-year history had survived past the first, and who currently looked less like a survivor and more like someone checking her wrist for the time. Round 19, he said slowly, was designed as this arena's final failsafe. It has never been activated. He looked up, past Vera, to the observation gallery where Ronan stood watching with the calm patience of a man who already knew how this ended. It was built on the assumption that nothing could survive past round 18. We do not know what happens if it fails. Then maybe, Consul Drath said quietly, cutting in before the arena master could reach for the final control crystal. We stop finding out. He rose from his seat, plaited robes rustling, and raised a hand toward the pit, the ancient Ithraxi gesture of formal concession. Trade concessions are granted, Drath said, loud enough for the amplification crystals to carry it across the emptying stands. Full terms, as petitioned. The challenge is concluded. Down in the ruins of round 18, Vera glanced up at the gallery, found Ronan's eyes, and offered a small, satisfied shrug. The universal gesture, on every world Ronan had ever visited, foretold you so. He was already composing the report in his head. It would be short. It usually was, after these. Subject: trade concessions, Ithraxi Empire, full terms secured. Note for the file: recommend future arena challenges specify a hazard ceiling in advance. Our combatants tend to get bored otherwise, and boredom makes for a very long afternoon for everybody involved.